The cafeteria buzzed with the usual lunchtime chaos. Trays clattered against tables, voices overlapped in a symphony of teenage conversation, and the smell of pizza and French fries hung thick in the air. Sat alone at a corner table near the windows, his sandwich untouched in front of him. He preferred it this way. The solitude gave him space to think, to observe, to exist without the pressure of maintaining conversations he didn't care about. He was tall for 17, with dark skin that gleamed under the fluorescent lights and eyes that seemed to see more than they should. His black hoodie was pulled up slightly, not to hide, but to create a boundary between himself and the world. Had learned early that being quiet didn't mean being weak. It meant being selective. And in a school where everyone seemed desperate to be noticed, his choice to remain on the periphery made him almost invisible. Almost. The cafeteria doors swung open and walked in. She wasn't hard to miss. Her hair caught the light like gold thread, and her smile seemed to brighten whatever space she occupied. She was the kind of girl who existed at the center of everything, surrounded by friends, admired by teachers, and noticed by everyone. Carter was High's golden girl, the junior class president, captain of the debate team, and someone who seemed to glide through life with an ease that found both fascinating and foreign. She grabbed her lunch tray and scanned the room. Her usual table was packed with her friends, all laughing at something on someone's phone. For a moment she stood there, tray in hand, and could see something flicker across her face. It wasn't quite sadness, but it wasn't happiness either. It was something closer to exhaustion. Then her eyes landed on him. Felt the shift in the air before she even started walking. Conversations at nearby tables began to quiet. Heads turned. Carter was moving away from her table, away from her friends, and she was walking directly toward the boy who sat alone every single day. His first instinct was to look behind him to see if there was someone else she was approaching. But there was only the window and the parking lot beyond. When he looked back, she was standing right in front of his table, tray balanced in both hands. That trademark smile softened into something more genuine. "Hi," she said. Her voice was gentle, almost uncertain. Do you mind if I sit here?" Stared at her. Around them, the cafeteria had gone from buzzing to humming. People were watching now, some openly, others pretending not to. He could feel their eyes like pinpricks on his skin. This was the kind of moment that would be dissected in hallway conversations and group texts for days. Carter, asking to sit with. The girl who had everything, approaching the boy who wanted nothing to do with anyone. He should have said no. Every instinct told him that this was a setup, a joke, or at best, some misguided attempt at charity. People didn't sit with people like him unless there was an angle. But when he looked at her, really looked at her, he didn't see pity. He didn't see mockery. He saw something he recognized because he'd felt it himself: loneliness. "Sure," he said simply, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. The cafeteria erupted in whispers, set her tray down and slid into the seat, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. She opened her milk carton and he picked up his sandwich, taking a bite more to have something to do than because he was hungry. "Thank you," said finally. "I know this is probably weird." Chewed slowly, then swallowed. "Yeah, it is." She laughed, and it was real, not the polished sound he'd heard her use in assemblies or at pep rallies. "I appreciate the honesty." "Why are you here?" he asked. Not rudely, but directly, didn't believe in dancing around questions. Looked down at her tray, pushing a French fry around with her fork. "Because I'm tired of sitting over there and pretending everything is perfect." That caught him off guard. He'd assumed she was perfect, or at least that her life was. She had friends, popularity, success. What could someone like her have to complain about? "What's wrong with your table?" he asked. "Nothing's wrong with it," she said. "That's the problem. Everything is exactly what it's supposed to be. Everyone talks about the same things, laughs at the same jokes, cares about the same stuff. And I needed a break." Studied her face. There were faint circles under her eyes that makeup didn't quite hide. Her smile, which had seemed so effortless from a distance, looked strained up close. She was tired, genuinely tired. "So you picked the weird loner in the corner," he said. "I picked someone who looked like they wouldn't judge me for wanting to be alone," she corrected. "There's a difference." He couldn't argue with that. For the first time in months, felt something close to curiosity about another person. He said, even though she probably already knew. Everyone knew everyone in a school this size, even if they never spoke. "I know," she said, confirming his suspicion. You're in my English class. You wrote that essay about isolation in modern society that Mrs. read out loud. He remembered. It had been uncomfortable having his words dissected in front of 30 people. But he'd written what he felt, and apparently it had resonated. You actually listened to that? He asked. Of course, it was the most interesting thing anyone's written all year. She took a bite of her salad, then looked at him. You're really smart, you know. Shrugged. Smart doesn't mean much if you don't know what to do with it. Maybe, or maybe you just haven't figured out what you want to do yet. They fell into silence again, but it was different this time. Less awkward, more comfortable. Found himself relaxing, his shoulders dropping from their usual defensive position. Ate her lunch, and he ate his, and for those few minutes, the cafeteria and all its chaos seemed to fade into background noise. Across the room, friends were starring. Brittany, her best friend since middle school, looked particularly confused, her phone in her hand like she was ready to text an emergency group message. Jackson, the basketball star who'd been trying to date for months, had his arms crossed and his jaw tight. Even the teachers monitoring lunch were glancing over, curious about this unexpected pairing. But didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she didn't care. Do you always sit alone? She asked. Yeah, said. Do you always sit with a crowd? Yeah, she echoed, smiling slightly. Maybe we both needed a change. The bell rang, sharp and insistent. Lunch was over. Students began gathering their trays, the cafeteria transforming from a social hub into a migration path toward afternoon classes. Stood, picking up her tray, and did the same. Thanks for letting me sit with you, she said. Thanks for asking, he replied. She smiled at him one more time, then headed toward the tray return. Watched her go, watched as her friends immediately swarmed her with questions, their voices overlapping in an interrogation disguised as concern. Fielded them with practiced ease, laughing and shrugging, making it seem like no big deal. But as she walked out of the cafeteria, she glanced back at him, just once, and in that glance saw a silent question, same time tomorrow. He didn't nod, didn't acknowledge it outwardly, but something inside him shifted. For the first time in a long time, tomorrow felt like something worth showing up for. The afternoon classes dragged on with their usual monotony. Sat through chemistry, barely listening as Mr. explained molecular structures. His mind kept drifting back to lunch, to the surprise of question, to the unexpected ease of their conversation. It didn't make sense. People like her didn't seek out people like him unless there was a reason, and he still couldn't figure out what that reason was. By the time the final bell rang, had convinced himself it was a one-time thing. A moment of rebellion on his part, a brief escape from her perfect life before she returned to normal. Tomorrow, she'd be back at her usual table, surrounded by her usual people, and he'd be back in his corner alone. He was okay with that, or at least he told himself he was. The next day arrived cold and gray, the kind of October morning that promised rain. Went through his routine on autopilot. Shower, dress, grab his backpack, avoid his mother's questions about school. She meant well, but explaining his day to her felt like translating a language she didn't speak. How could he tell her that he preferred solitude when she'd spent her whole life building community, working double shifts at the hospital, and still finding time to volunteer at church? School was the same as always. Hallways packed with bodies, lockers slamming, teachers trying and failing to corral students into classrooms. Moved through it all like a ghost, present but unseen. Until English class. He walked in and found already seated 2 rows ahead of him. She was talking to Sarah, another girl from her friend group, but when entered, she turned slightly, catching his eye. She smiled. Not the public smile she gave everyone, but something smaller, more private, just for him. Felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. He nodded back, then took his usual seat by the window. Mrs. started class with a discussion about their latest reading assignment, The Stranger by Albert Camus. The conversation meandered through themes of alienation and absurdism, with the usual students contributing the usual insights. Listened but didn't participate. He never did. Then raised her hand. I think we're missing something, she said when Mrs. called on her. Everyone keeps talking about Merceau's indifference like it's abnormal, but maybe he's just honest. Maybe the rest of us are the weird ones for pretending to feel things we don't. The class went quiet. Mrs. eyebrows rose slightly. That's an interesting take. Can you elaborate? Well, continued and found himself leaning forward slightly. Society tells us how we're supposed to react to things. Someone dies, we're supposed to cry. Someone succeeds, we're supposed to celebrate. But what if you don't feel those things? What if you're just numb? Does that make you a monster, or does it make you human in a different way? Felt the words sink into him like stones into water. She was describing exactly how he felt most of the time. Like he was supposed to have reactions he didn't have, emotions he couldn't manufacture no matter how hard he tried. Mrs. nodded thoughtfully. That's a very empathetic reading of a character most people find unsettling. Anyone want to respond? Surprised himself by speaking. Maybe both, he said. The room turned to look at him, unused to hearing his voice. Maybe he's human and a monster. Maybe we all are, depending on who's looking. Turned fully in her seat to face him, her eyes bright with recognition. She understood. Whatever he'd just said, she understood it completely. Mrs. smiled. Now we're getting somewhere. I want you two to partner up for the next assignment. You'll be analyzing Camus's philosophy of absurdism and presenting your findings to the class. Felt his stomach drop. Group work. He hated group work, but before he could protest, was nodding enthusiastically. Perfect, she said. We can work on it at lunch. And just like that, lunch together became official. When noon arrived, headed to the cafeteria with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. He grabbed his usual sandwich and apple, paid, and made his way to his corner table. He half expected to bail to come up with an excuse to retreat to the safety of her friends. But she was already there, waiting for him. Hey, she said as he sat down. I brought my copy of the book, thought we could start brainstorming. You're serious about this, he said. Why wouldn't I be? Because you could have picked anyone to work with. Sarah, Brittany, any of them would have said yes. Set her fork down and looked at him directly. I didn't want to work with them, I wanted to work with you. Why? Because you're the only person in that class who actually thinks about what we're reading instead of just regurgitating what the internet says. She pulled out her notebook, flipping to a clean page. Plus, you're interesting. I'm really not. See, that's exactly what makes you interesting, she said, pointing her pen at him. You have no idea how rare it is to meet someone who isn't constantly performing. Didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Instead, he pulled out his own notebook and they began to work. What started as an assignment discussion turned into something deeper. They talked about Camus, about absurdism, about the idea that life had no inherent meaning and what that meant for how you chose to live. Had thoughts, real thoughts, not just things she'd memorized for a test. She challenged his ideas, and he challenged hers, and somewhere in the middle they found common ground. Around them, the cafeteria continued its daily drama. His friends kept glancing over, their confusion morphing into something closer to concern. Jackson walked past their table twice, both times slowing down like he wanted to say something, but didn't even look up. Do they bother you? Asked, gesturing subtly toward her usual table. Glanced over, then shrugged. They're my friends, but sometimes friendship feels more like a performance than a connection, you know. He did know. He'd stopped performing years ago, which was why he had no friends, but was still in the middle of it, still playing the part even as it exhausted her. Why don't you just tell them how you feel? He asked. Because they wouldn't understand, she said simply. They'd try to fix it or tell me I'm overthinking or suggest I need to relax. They mean well, but they don't get it. And you think I do? She met his eyes. Yeah, I think you do. The bell rang, ending lunch for the second day in a row. As they packed up their things, touched his arm lightly. Same time tomorrow, she asked. 3 weeks passed, and what had started as an unexpected lunch invitation became a daily ritual. Every day at noon would walk into the cafeteria, bypass her usual table without a second glance, and sit down across from. Sometimes they worked on their Camus project. Sometimes they talked about books, music, or the absurdity of high school social hierarchies. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, both of them eating their lunch while watching the chaos unfold around them. Found himself looking forward to lunch in a way he never had before. Was different from what he'd expected. Behind the perfect exterior, she was thoughtful, curious, and surprisingly funny. She made observations about people that were sharp without being cruel, and she listened when he spoke like his words actually mattered. But not everyone was pleased with this development. The whispers had started after that first lunch and had only grown louder. In a school where social currency was everything, choice to sit with was like watching a celebrity befriend a homeless person. It didn't make sense to anyone, which meant everyone had theories. She's doing it for attention, some said. She's trying to prove she's not like other popular girls. It's for some social experiment, others claimed. Probably for college applications. She's going to write an essay about befriending the lonely kid. Maybe it's a bet, the voices suggested. Maybe her friends dared her to see how long she could pretend to care. Heard the rumors, it was impossible not to. They followed him through hallways, lingered in bathroom stalls, echoed in the careful way teachers looked at him, and when they worked together in class. He tried not to let them bother him. He'd been talked about before, invisible for so long that being visible felt strange even when it was for the wrong reasons. But was taking the brunt of it. Her friends had moved from confusion to intervention. Brittany cornered her after chemistry one day, her voice loud enough that half the hallway could hear. Seriously, what are you doing? Brittany demanded. You've barely sat with us in weeks. We're worried about you. Shifted her backpack on her shoulder. I'm fine, Britt. I'm just making a new friend. That's not making a friend, that's social suicide, Brittany hissed. People are talking. They're saying you're going through something, that maybe you're depressed or whatever. It's making all of us look bad. Making you look bad. His voice had an edge had never heard before. How exactly does me sitting with someone at lunch affect you? Because we're a group, Em. What you do reflects on all of us. And sitting with that weird kid who never talks to anyone makes it seem like you think you're better than us. Maybe I don't think I'm better, said quietly. Maybe I just think differently. The argument ended there, with Brittany storming off and standing alone in the hallway, her perfect composure finally cracking. Had watched from his locker, too far away to intervene but close enough to see the hurt on her face. He caught up with her before next period. You okay? He asked. Wiped at her eyes quickly, though he'd already seen the tears. Yeah, just friend drama, it's stupid. It's not stupid if it's hurting you. She looked at him, surprised. When did you become the wise one? I'm not wise, I just recognize pain when I see it. He hesitated, then said what had been bothering him for days. You don't have to keep sitting with me. If it's causing problems with your friends, I get it. Is that what you want? She asked. For me to stop sitting with you? No, he admitted, but I don't want to make your life harder. Smiled, though it was sad around the edges. My life has been hard for a long time. I've just been really good at hiding it. Sitting with you is the only easy thing I've done in months. They walked to class together after that, and if people stared, neither of them acknowledged it. The breaking point came during a Friday pep rally. High took its football seriously, and pep rallies were mandatory attendance spectacles of school spirit. The gymnasium was packed, bleachers filled with students sorted by grade, the cheerleaders performing routines while the football team was introduced like conquering heroes. The noise was deafening, the energy manic. Hated pep rallies. He always sat in the back, as far from the action as possible, counting down the minutes until he could leave. Usually sat with the junior class officers in the front row, leading cheers and looking enthusiastic. But today, she climbed the bleachers and sat down next to him. What are you doing? He asked, genuinely shocked. Sitting with my friend, she said simply. Is that okay? Around them, students stared. The junior section down below was in chaos, its empty seat like a missing tooth in an otherwise perfect smile. Brittany was on her phone, probably texting frantically. Jackson was looking up at the bleachers with an expression that mixed confusion and anger. Everyone's watching, said. Let them watch. She pulled out her phone, silenced it, and put it away. I'm tired of performing. The rally continued, but barely paid attention. He was too aware of beside him, too conscious of the stares, too caught up in trying to understand what was happening. This wasn't about lunch anymore. This was making a choice, a public declaration that she valued their friendship more than her reputation. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. When the rally ended, students flooded toward the exits, and were among the last to leave, waiting for the crowd to thin. As they walked down the bleachers, Jackson was waiting. Can I talk to you? He asked, his voice tight. He didn't even look at. Sure, said. I'll see you later. Nodded and walked away, but he couldn't help glancing back. Jackson was talking animatedly, his hands gesturing, his body language aggressive. Stood with her arms crossed, her face unreadable. He didn't see her for the rest of the day. That evening was reading in his room when his phone buzzed. It was a number he didn't recognize, but the message was clear. "Hey, it's got your number from the class roster. Hope that's not weird. Can we talk?" He typed back, "Not weird, what's up?" Her response came quickly. "Jackson basically told me I need to choose between my real friends and you. Said I'm embarrassing myself and everyone associated with me." Stared at the message, anger coiling in his stomach. "What did you say?" "I told him that if my friendship with you embarrasses him, he was never really my friend to begin with." Reread the message 3 times, each time feeling something warm and unfamiliar spreading through his chest. No one had ever chosen him before. No one had ever thought he was worth the cost. "You didn't have to do that," he typed. "Yes, I did," she replied. "You're the only person in this school who talks to me like I'm a person and not a trophy. That's worth keeping." They texted for hours that night, the conversation flowing easily from school drama to deeper things. Told him about the pressure she felt to be perfect, how exhausting it was to maintain an image that didn't feel real. She talked about her parents' expectations, their plans for her future, how sometimes she felt like she was living someone else's life. Shared things he'd never told anyone. About his father who'd left when he was 8, about the anger he'd carried for years, about how solitude had become both his shield and his prison. About how he'd convinced himself he didn't need people, when really he was just scared of being hurt. "We're more alike than anyone would think," wrote. "Two people drowning in different oceans," replied. "Maybe, or maybe we just found a life raft." The weekend passed in a blur of texts and phone calls. By Monday, felt like he knew better than he knew most people. And when he walked into school, he wasn't surprised to see that things had changed. Was no longer sitting with her old friends. Her usual table had closed ranks, Brittany and the others huddled together like they were under siege. A few of them glanced at when she walked past, but none called out to her. The message was clear. She'd made her choice, and there was no going back. If was bothered, she didn't show it. She walked through the hallways with her head high, greeting people who greeted her, ignoring the whispers that followed her like a shadow. When lunch came, she sat down across from like always. "You okay?" he asked. "Honestly, yeah." She opened her lunch bag and pulled out a sandwich. "It's weird, but I feel lighter, like I've been carrying around this weight and I finally put it down." "No regrets?" "None." She took a bite of her sandwich, then smiled at him. "Well, maybe one. I wish I'd done this sooner." Their Camus presentation was scheduled for Wednesday. They'd spent hours preparing, meeting at the library after school, texting late into the night, refining their argument. The thesis was simple but powerful. Absurdism wasn't about nihilism or despair, but about freedom. If life had no inherent meaning, then you were free to create your own. The day of the presentation arrived cold and bright. Dressed carefully that morning, wanting to look presentable. Had texted him early, ready to blow everyone's minds. He'd replied, "As ready as I'll ever be." English class felt different that day. The energy was charged, expectant. Everyone knew about Anne's friendship by now, and everyone was curious to see them work together publicly. Mrs. called them to the front of the room and felt his heart hammering as he stood. Went first, her voice clear and confident as she outlined Camus's philosophy. She explained the myth of Sisyphus, the man condemned to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, only to watch it roll back down. Most people saw it as a tragedy, she said, but Camus saw it as a triumph. Then took over, his voice quieter but steady. "Sisyphus is free," he said, "because he accepts his fate. He doesn't hope for something different. He doesn't rage against the absurdity. He just lives, and in that acceptance he finds meaning." They went back and forth, building on each other's points, their chemistry obvious. Talked about how society imposed meaning on our lives, while discussed how finding your own meaning was an act of rebellion. They quoted Camus, referenced other philosophers, tied it all back to the novel they'd read. When they finished, the class was silent for a moment. Then Mrs. started clapping and the rest of the class joined in. It wasn't polite applause. It was genuine appreciation. "That was excellent," Mrs. said. "You two work very well together. I hope you'll partner up again in the future." As they returned to their seats, Cott's eye and grinned. He smiled back, and for the first time in years, he felt proud of something he'd done. After class, students approached them with questions, compliments, and curious looks. Even some of his former friends admitted the presentation was impressive. The tide was shifting. People were starting to see them not as a social oddity, but as a legitimate friendship. But not everyone was pleased. That afternoon was at his locker when Jackson appeared beside him. The hallway was crowded, students rushing to their next classes, but Jackson's presence created a pocket of tension. "We need to talk," Jackson said. Closed his locker slowly. "About what?" "About," Jackson crossed his arms, his athletic build making him look more imposing than he probably intended. "Look, I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to back off." "I'm not playing any game," said evenly, "and I are friends." "Friends?" Jackson laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Guys like you don't have friends like her. You're using her for something, and when everyone figures it out, she's going to be the one who gets hurt. You don't know anything about me. I know you're a loner who suddenly has the most popular girl in school hanging on your every word. That seems suspicious to me." Felt anger rising in his chest, hot and familiar. He'd dealt with bullies before, with people who made assumptions based on how he looked or acted. But this was different. This wasn't about him. This was about. "Maybe you should ask yourself why she chose to be my friend instead of staying with you," said quietly. "Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe it's that you never saw her as a person, just as someone who made you look good." Jackson's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I? Told me about your conversation, about how you said she was embarrassing herself. Real friends don't talk like that. Real friends don't let their friends throw their lives away for some charity case," Jackson shot back. The words stung, hitting closer to insecurities than Jackson probably knew. But before he could respond, a voice cut through the tension. "That's enough." Was standing a few feet away, her expression cold. Didn't know how long she'd been there, but from the look on her face, she'd heard enough. Jackson started. "No," she interrupted. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to harass my friend and then act like you're protecting me. I can make my own decisions, Jackson, and I've decided that is more important to me than whatever image you're trying to preserve." "You're making a mistake," Jackson said. "The only mistake I made was thinking people like you were actually my friends." Moved to stand beside, a clear signal of where her loyalty lay. "We're done here." Jackson stared at them for a long moment, then shook his head and walked away. The hallway had gone quiet, students pretending not to watch while hanging on every word. Ignored them all, turning to with concern in her eyes. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I should be asking you that," he said. "You just burned another bridge." "It wasn't much of a bridge if it couldn't handle the truth." She touched his arm gently. "Come on, let's get out of here." They left school early that day, neither of them able to face the stares and whispers anymore. Drove them to a coffee shop across town, a quiet place where no one from High would see them. They ordered drinks and sat in a corner booth, the weight of the day finally settling on both of them. "I'm sorry," said. "This is all my fault." "How is any of this your fault?" asked. "Because I'm the reason you're losing your friends. I'm the reason people are talking about you. If I'd just said no that first day, then I'd still be sitting at that table, pretending to be happy, dying a little bit every day." Reached across and took his hand, the gesture surprising them both. "You didn't ruin my life. You saved it. You showed me that I could choose something different, be someone different. That's not something I'll ever regret." Looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. When had this become more than friendship? When had sitting together at lunch turned into late-night phone calls and inside jokes? When had he started looking forward to seeing her every day, not just as a pleasant surprise, but as a necessity? "I don't want you to get hurt because of me," he said quietly. "Then don't push me away," she replied. "That's the only thing that would hurt." They sat there for hours, talking about everything and nothing. About their dreams for the future, about colleges they wanted to attend, about lives they hoped to build. Wanted to study psychology, to understand why people acted the way they did. Wanted to write, to put words to the feelings that lived inside him. "We could end up anywhere," said. "Different states, different worlds." "That's years away," reminded her. "I know, but I want you to know that wherever I end up, I'm grateful this happened. That you happened." Squeezed her hand. "Me too." When finally drove him home, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She pulled up in front of his house, and they sat there for a moment, neither wanting the day to end. "See you tomorrow?" she asked. "Same time, same place," he confirmed. She smiled, and he got out of the car, watching as she drove away. His mother was at the window when he walked inside, a knowing look on her face. "Who was that?" she asked. "A friend," said. "Must be a good friend to make you smile like that." November arrived with a cold snap that turned the world gray and brittle. The trees outside high shed their last leaves, and students huddled in hoodies and scarves, complaining about the early winter. But the season felt alive with possibility. For the first time in his life, he had someone who understood him, someone who chose him every single day. His friendship with had settled into something comfortable but also thrilling. They had their routines now: lunch together every day, study sessions at the library twice a week, weekend coffee shop visits where they talked for hours. But there were new developments too, small moments that made his heart race in ways he didn't quite understand. The way laughed at his jokes, her whole face lighting up. The way she texted him good morning before school and good night before bed. The way she'd started touching his arm when she talked, casual and natural, like she'd been doing it forever. The way she looked at him sometimes, with an intensity that made him forget how to breathe. Had never had a girlfriend. He'd never even considered the possibility. Romance seemed like something that happened to other people, people who knew how to navigate the complicated dance of feelings and expectations. But lately, he'd caught himself wondering what it would be like to hold his hand for real, not just in that brief moment at the coffee shop. What it would be like to kiss her, to tell her she was beautiful, to be more than just her friend. The thought terrified him, because if he was wrong, if she didn't feel the same way, he'd lose the best thing that had ever happened to him. And that was a risk he wasn't sure he could take. For her part seemed to be going through changes of her own. She'd stopped trying to repair things with her old friends. Brittany and the others had made it clear they considered her friendship with a betrayal and had accepted their decision with a grace that admired. She'd found new friends, quieter people who existed on the fringes of social groups. Maya from art class, David from the school newspaper, from the library. They weren't popular, but they were genuine, and they welcomed without judgment. "I like them," told one day at lunch. They were sitting at their usual table, but now Maya and David sat with them, the group small but solid. "They don't care about the drama. They just want to talk about things that actually matter." "You mean like whether a hot dog is a sandwich?" David asked, grinning. He was tall and gangly, with glasses that were constantly slipping down his nose and an enthusiasm for debating ridiculous topics. "Obviously it's a sandwich," Maya said. She was small and fierce, with short purple hair and paint perpetually under her fingernails. "It's protein between bread, that's literally the definition." "But the bread isn't separated," argued. "It's connected at the bottom, that makes it a taco." Laughed, the sound surprising even himself. A few months ago, the idea of sitting at a lunch table with multiple people, engaging in silly debates, would have been unthinkable. Now it felt natural. "You're all wrong," he said. "It's its own category. Some things defy classification." "Deep," David said, mock serious. "Is this what Camus was talking about, the absurdity of categorizing hot dogs?" They all laughed and felt something warm settle in his chest. This was what friendship was supposed to feel like. Easy, real, uncomplicated by expectations or performances. But not everyone at school had moved on. The rumors about and had evolved. People no longer questioned why they were friends. Now they questioned what kind of friends they were. Were they dating? Was it romantic? The speculation was constant, fueled by the way they looked at each other, the time they spent together, the obvious chemistry between them. Tried to ignore it, but it was hard when people asked him directly. "So are you two together or what?" a guy from his math class asked one day. "We're friends," said, the answer automatic. "Come on, man. Nobody spends that much time with someone unless there's something going on." Had walked away without responding, but the question lingered. Was there something going on? And if there was, what was he supposed to do about it? The answer came during an unexpected moment. It was a Friday afternoon, and had stayed after school to work on an article for the school newspaper. David had recruited him to write a piece about social isolation in high school, and had agreed, finding the topic both challenging and cathartic. He was in the library, typing away on his laptop, when slid into the chair next to him. "Hey," she said, "I've been looking for you." "Had to finish this article," he explained. "David wants it by Monday." "Can I read what you have so far?" Hesitated, then turned his laptop toward her. Writing was personal for him, revealing in ways that conversation wasn't. But if he couldn't share it with, who could he share it with? She read in silence, her expression serious. When she finished, she looked at him with something like wonder in her eyes. "This is beautiful," she said. "The way you describe loneliness, it's like you're giving it texture and color, making it something people can touch." "Is that good?" he asked, genuinely uncertain. "It's more than good, it's honest." She turned the laptop back to him. "You should write more, like seriously, you have a gift." "I'm just writing about what I know." "That's what makes it powerful." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know what I love about you." His heart stuttered. "What?" "You don't pretend. Everyone else is so busy trying to be someone they're not, but you're just you, completely unapologetically yourself." She smiled. "It's refreshing and kind of inspiring." "You inspire me too," said before he could stop himself. "The way you stood up for what you believed in, even when it cost you everything, that takes courage I don't have." "You have more courage than you think," said. "You chose to be alone rather than fake being someone else. That's brave." They were sitting close now, close enough that could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. Close enough that if he leaned forward just a little, their faces would be inches apart. The library was nearly empty, the silence broken only by the hum of computers and the distant sound of the janitor's cart in the hallway. His phone buzzed, breaking the moment. She glanced at it and sighed. "My mom, I have to go, dinner with my grandparents." She stood, gathering her things, then paused. "Are you doing anything tomorrow?" "Not really, why?" "There's an art exhibit downtown. Maya told me about it, want to come with me." Had never been to an art exhibit in his life. He had no idea if he'd even like it. But the thought of spending more time with, outside the structure of school, made him say yes immediately. "Sure, what time?" "I'll pick you up at 2. "Sounds good." She smiled, and as she walked away, watched her go, his article forgotten. Something was shifting between them, something inevitable and terrifying and exciting all at once. That night couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with the way she looked at him, the things she said, the comfortable silence that existed between them. Was he reading too much into it, or was there really something there? His phone buzzed. It was. "Still up?" "Yeah," he typed back. "You." "Can't sleep, keep thinking about stuff." "What kind of stuff?" There was a long pause. Watched the 3 dots appear and disappear multiple times. Finally, her message came through. "About how much things have changed, how much I've changed, and how glad I am that I asked to sit with you that day." His hands trembled slightly as he typed his response. "I'm glad you did too. Best thing that's happened to me in a long time." "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." Another pause. "Do you ever think about us as more than friends?" His heart stopped. The question hung there on his screen, impossible to ignore or deflect. This was it, the moment where everything either moved forward or fell apart. He could lie, he could say no, protect himself from the vulnerability of admitting the truth, but had been honest with him from the beginning. She deserved the same. "All the time," he typed. "Do you?" The response came quickly this time. "Yes." 1 word, 3 letters, everything. Stared at the message, his mind racing. What did this mean? Were they about to cross a line they couldn't uncross? And if they did, what happened next? "What do we do about it?" he typed. "I don't know," she replied, "but maybe tomorrow we can figure it out." "Tomorrow," he confirmed. "Good night." "Good night." He set his phone down and lay back, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Tomorrow, they would figure it out tomorrow. Whatever it was, whatever this thing between them had become, tomorrow they would face it. Finally fell asleep somewhere around 3 in the morning, and when he woke up, the sun was already high in the sky. He checked his phone. It was noon, would be there in 2 hours. He showered, dressed in his best jeans and a clean button-down shirt, and tried to tame his hair with minimal success. His mother noticed him getting ready and raised an eyebrow. "Special occasion?" she asked. "Just going to an art exhibit," he said, trying to sound casual. "With your friend?" "With." His mother smiled. "She seems like a good person." "She is," said. "She's the best person I know." "Then you better not keep her waiting." At exactly 2 o'clock's car pulled up outside. Grabbed his jacket and headed out, his nerves making his hands shake slightly. When he got in the car, smiled at him, and some of his anxiety melted away. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," he confirmed. The drive downtown was filled with easy conversation, both of them carefully avoiding the subject of last night's texts. The art exhibit was in a small gallery in the warehouse district, a space with exposed brick walls and high ceilings. Maya had recommended it, saying the artist explored themes of isolation and connection, which seemed almost too perfect given everything happening between and. They walked through the gallery slowly, examining each piece. The art was abstract, swirls of color and texture that suggested emotion more than form. Some pieces felt lonely, isolated splashes of paint on vast canvases. Others felt crowded, chaotic combinations of shapes and shades. "What do you think?" asked, standing in front of a particularly striking piece. It showed two distinct color patterns on opposite sides of the canvas, separated by empty space but with small tendrils of paint reaching across the gap, not quite touching. "I think it's about the space between people," said. "How sometimes you can be close to someone and still feel separated, and how brave you have to be to bridge that gap." Turned to look at him. "Yeah, that's exactly what it's about." They moved to the next piece, but was of how close was walking to him. Their shoulders kept brushing, her hand occasionally grazing his. Every touch sent electricity through him. Finally, they reached the last room of the exhibit. It was smaller than the others, dimmer, with a single piece displayed on the far wall. This one was different. Instead of abstract shapes, it showed two clear silhouettes facing each other, their hands almost touching, the space between them filled with galaxies and stars. "It's beautiful," whispered. "It is," agreed, but he wasn't looking at the painting. He was looking at her. Turned and caught him staring. For a moment, neither of them moved. The gallery was empty except for them, the silence heavy with everything unsaid. I said softly. He replied, "I need to tell you something." His heart raced. "Okay. That first day when I asked to sit with you, I told you it was because I needed a break from my friends. And that was true, but it wasn't the whole truth." She took a breath. "I'd been watching you for weeks before that. The way you sat alone, the way you seemed completely comfortable with yourself. I was fascinated by you, and maybe a little envious." Didn't know what to say, so he stayed quiet, letting her continue. "And then I sat down and you were exactly what I hoped you'd be. Real, honest, interesting, and the more time we spent together, the more I realized that I wasn't just fascinated anymore. I was falling for you." The words hung in the air between them, as significant as the space between the silhouettes in the painting. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "because I've never felt this way about anyone, and I don't want to lose you if this doesn't work. But I also can't keep pretending that we're just friends when I want so much more than that." His mind was spinning. Carter, the girl who could have anyone, was standing in an art gallery telling him she was falling for him. It didn't feel real. It felt like something from a movie or a dream or someone else's life. But it was his life, and she was here, vulnerable and honest, waiting for him to say something. "I'm terrified too," he finally said. "I've never done this before, any of this. I don't know how to be someone's boyfriend or how to do romance or any of it. But I know that when I'm with you, I feel like myself, the best version of myself. And I've been falling for you too, since probably that first lunch, if I'm being honest." She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Really? Really? So what do we do now?" Took a breath, gathering every ounce of courage he had. Then he reached out and took her hand, properly this time, lacing his fingers through hers. "I think," he said, "we stop being scared and start being honest about what this is." "And what is this?" she asked, stepping closer. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I want to find out with you." Squeezed his hand. "I want that too." They stood there in the small gallery room, holding hands in front of a painting about connection, and for the first time in his life, felt truly connected to another person. Not just friends, not just allies in navigating the chaos of high school, but something deeper, something that had the potential to become anything they wanted it to be. "Can I kiss you?" asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His answer was to lean in and close the distance between them. The kiss was soft and tentative, neither of them quite sure what they were doing. But it was also perfect in its imperfection, a first kiss between two people who had found each other against all odds. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "That was nice," said. "Yeah, agreed, really nice." They left the gallery hand in hand, stepping out into the afternoon sunlight. The world looked different somehow, brighter and more vivid, or maybe was just seeing it through new eyes. So, said as they walked to her car, I guess this means we're dating now. I guess it does, said. Is that okay? It's more than okay. She unlocked the car, but instead of getting in, she turned to face him. You know people are going to talk even more now, right? The rumors are going to get worse. Let them talk, said. I don't care what anyone thinks, not anymore. When did you get so brave? Asked, smiling. I learned from the best, he replied. They drove back to his house, talking about everything and nothing, their hands linked across the center console. When pulled up to his curb, didn't want the day to end. Thank you, he said, for today, for everything. Thank you, replied, for taking a chance on me. You took a chance on me first, he reminded her. Best decision I ever made. Leaned over and kissed her again, this time with more confidence. When they pulled apart, both of them were grinning like idiots. Text me when you get home, he asked. Always, she promised. He got out of the car and watched her drive away, his heart full in a way it had never been before. His mother was waiting inside, her knowing smile firmly in place. Good day, she asked. The best, said. That night, lying in bed with his phone lighting up with messages from, thought about how much his life had changed in just a few months. He'd gone from being completely alone to having friends, having someone who cared about him, having something that felt dangerously close to happiness. The news spread through high like wildfire. By Monday morning, everyone knew that and were officially together. The reactions were varied and intense. Some people were supportive, genuinely happy to see two people find each other. Others were skeptical, convinced it wouldn't last. And some, particularly former friends, were openly hostile and had decided to be open about their relationship rather than hide it. They walked through the hallways holding hands, sat together at lunch with their small group of friends, and didn't shy away from public displays of affection. It was a statement, deliberate and clear. They were together, and they weren't apologizing for it. The attention was overwhelming at first. Had spent so long being invisible that being seen felt like standing under a spotlight. People stared. People whispered. People had opinions about his relationship, his worthiness, his intentions. It would have been easy to retreat, to go back to being the loner in the corner. But every time he felt that urge, he'd look at and remember why he was doing this. For her part, handled the attention with grace. She'd spent her entire life being watched, being discussed, being the subject of gossip. But now, instead of trying to control the narrative, she simply stopped caring what people thought. She was happy, genuinely happy, and that mattered more than maintaining an image. Their small group of friends had grown. Maya, David, and were constants at their lunch table now, joined occasionally by others who didn't quite fit anywhere else. The quiet kids, the artists, the nerds, the ones who existed in the spaces between social groups. Together, they'd created their own little community, built on acceptance rather than exclusion. I love this, said one day at lunch, looking around at their table. I spent so long trying to fit in with people who never really knew me. This feels real. It is real, Maya agreed. She was working on a sketch in her notebook while she ate, her purple hair falling over her face. No performance required. Just bring your weird self and we're good, David added, grinning. Smiled, watching laugh with their friends. She looked lighter these days, less burdened by the weight of expectations. The dark circles under her eyes had faded. Her smile reached her eyes more often. Being herself, being free to choose her own path, had transformed her. But not everything was perfect. His parents had found out about her relationship with, and they weren't pleased. Had come to school one morning with red eyes, clearly having cried. When asked what was wrong, she'd pulled him aside and explained. They think I'm throwing my life away, she said, her voice tight with frustration. My dad actually said that dating someone like you would hurt my chances of getting into a good college, like who I date determines my worth. Felt anger flare in his chest, but also something darker. The old familiar voice that said he wasn't good enough, that people like him didn't deserve people like. Maybe they have a point, he said quietly. His head snapped up. Don't you dare think you're not good enough. My parents are wrong. They're so focused on image and status that they've forgotten what actually matters. What matters? Asked. This, she took his hand. Us being happy, being real, that matters more than anything they're worried about. But if I'm causing problems between you and your family— You're not causing anything, interrupted. They are, by being small-minded and judgmental, and I'm not going to let their prejudices dictate my life. She'd stood up to them, she told them that was important to her, that he made her happy, that their approval wasn't required. The conversation had ended with her father storming off, and her mother giving her a disappointed look that cut deeper than any words. "Are you going to be okay?" asked. "I don't know," admitted, "but I know I'm not going to give you up just because they can't see what I see." Pulled her into a hug right there in the hallway, not caring who saw. "Thank you," he whispered, "for fighting for us." "Always," she whispered back. The incident with his parents marked a turning point, became more determined to prove that she could make her own choices. She threw herself into her schoolwork with renewed intensity, determined to show that her relationship with didn't distract her but motivated her. Her grades, already excellent, became perfect. She won a statewide debate competition. She started a peer counseling program at school that earned praise from administrators. She was proving that she could be both in love and successful, that the two weren't mutually exclusive. Inspired by her example, started pushing himself too. He joined the school newspaper officially, writing articles that gained attention for their honesty and insight. He submitted a short story to a national writing contest that Maya had told him about. He even started tutoring other students in English, using his understanding of literature to help them see beyond the surface of what they were reading. For the first time in his life, had a vision of his future that excited him. He could see himself as a writer, telling stories that mattered, giving voice to the lonely and the overlooked. And he could see beside him, whatever path she chose, their futures intertwined but not dependent. But high school has a way of testing relationships, and theirs was about to face its biggest challenge yet. It started with a school project. Mrs. assigned a group project worth 30% of their grade, a comprehensive analysis of a major American novel. Students were allowed to choose their own groups, and naturally, and plan to work together. But Mrs. had other ideas. "I want you to work with people outside your comfort zone," she announced. "So I'm assigning partners randomly." The class groaned, felt his stomach sink as Mrs. read off pairs. When she got to his name, she paused. "You'll be working with Jackson." The class went silent. Everyone knew the history there, the confrontation in the hallway, the bad blood. His face went pale, and Jackson looked equally unhappy, felt anger rising but kept his expression neutral. And Mrs. continued, "You'll be working with Brittany." It was like the universe had decided to test them both. After class and walked to lunch together, both of them processing what had just happened. "This is going to be awful," said. "Jackson can barely look at me without scowling. How are we supposed to work together for a month?" "At least you don't have to work with someone who thinks you're corrupting her best friend," pointed out. "Brittany is going to make my life hell." They sat down at their usual table, and Maya immediately picked up on their mood. "What happened?" she asked. "Explain the situation." David whistled low. "That's rough, really knows how to stir the pot." "Maybe she's trying to force us to work through our conflicts," suggested. She was quiet most of the time, but when she spoke, it was usually something thoughtful, like some kind of social experiment. "Well, the experiment is going to fail," said. "There's no way Jackson and I can work together effectively." "You have to try," said. "It's 30% of your grade." "I know, but—" trailed off, frustrated. The first group meeting was scheduled for Thursday after school in the library. Arrived early, finding a table in the back and pulling out his copy of The Great Gatsby, the novel he and Brittany were assigned to analyze. He was dreading this, but he'd promised himself he'd be professional. Brittany arrived 10 minutes late, her designer bag slung over her shoulder, her expression already showing her displeasure. She sat down across from without greeting him and pulled out her own book. "Let's just get this over with," she said. "I'll do chapters 1 through 5, you do 6 through 9. We'll combine our notes at the end." "That's not how group work works," said calmly. "We're supposed to collaborate." "I don't want to collaborate with you," Brittany said bluntly. "I want to get a good grade and move on with my life." Took a breath, fighting the urge to match her hostility. "Look, I know you don't like me, and I know you blame me for what happened with, but we're stuck together for this project, so we might as well make it work." "You know what I don't understand?" Brittany leaned forward. What sees in you? You're nobody. You have no friends, no social status, nothing. And somehow you convinced the most popular girl in school to throw away everything for you. I didn't convince her to do anything, said. Made her own choices. She made stupid choices, Brittany snapped. She had everything and she gave it all up to be with you. Do you have any idea how selfish that is? Selfish, felt his temper rising. She was miserable sitting at your table, pretending to be someone she wasn't. How is choosing to be happy selfish? Because she wasn't just choosing for herself. Brittany's voice rose, attracting looks from other students in the library. She was part of a group. We looked out for each other, and then she decided we weren't good enough anymore. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? Because from where I'm sitting, you showed up and changed. She stopped caring about the people who'd been there for her for years. She stopped caring about her reputation, her future, everything. All because of you. Stared at Brittany, seeing the hurt beneath her anger. This wasn't really about him. This was about feeling abandoned, about watching a friendship dissolve and not understanding why. She didn't stop caring about you, said quietly. She started caring about herself. There's a difference. Brittany looked away, her jaw tight. Whatever, can we just do this project? They worked in tense silence for an hour, both of them taking notes on the novel, neither attempting conversation beyond the necessary. When they finally packed up, felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the work. Meanwhile, his first meeting with Jackson wasn't going much better. They'd met in an empty classroom, the air between them thick with unspoken resentment. Jackson had barely said hello before diving into the work, his tone clipped and professional. They were analyzing To Kill a Mockingbird, a novel about prejudice and moral courage, which felt almost ironic given their situation. I'll write the introduction and conclusion, Jackson said. You handle the body paragraphs. We should outline it together first, suggested. Make sure we're on the same page. Jackson sighed. Fine, what's the thesis? They debated the thesis for 20 minutes, neither willing to concede to the other's interpretation. Argued that the novel was primarily about the loss of innocence, while Jackson insisted it was about the importance of moral courage. Both were valid interpretations, but neither would budge. This is impossible, finally said. We can't even agree on what the book is about. Maybe if you actually listened instead of assuming you're always right, Jackson started. I am listening, interrupted. You're the one who's being stubborn because you're still mad about everything. You're right, I am mad, Jackson said. You want to know why? Because you were supposed to be my friend. We were supposed to go to homecoming together, maybe start dating. Everyone expected it, and then you threw it all away for some guy you barely knew. I barely knew him then, said. I know him now, and he's worth more than any expectation or assumption about what I'm supposed to do. That's exactly what I mean, Jackson said, frustrated. You used to care about what people thought. You used to be part of something bigger than yourself. Now you're just and isolated from everyone else. We're not isolated, we have friends. You have a little group of misfits who sit in the corner, Jackson said dismissively. That's not the same as being part of the school community. Felt anger boiling in her chest. You know what, Jackson? I'd rather sit in the corner with people who actually care about me than be in the middle of the room with people who only care about my image. The argument escalated from there, both of them saying things they'd regret later. By the time they left, they hadn't made any progress on the project, and their relationship had somehow gotten worse. That night and talked on the phone for hours, both of them venting about their respective partners. Brittany acts like I kidnapped you, said, like you didn't have a choice in any of this. Jackson is the same way, replied. He keeps talking about what I'm supposed to do like I'm following some script and I've gone off book. How are we going to survive a month of this? I don't know, but we have to try. If we let this project destroy our grades, we're proving them right, that our relationship is a distraction. It's not a distraction, said firmly. If anything, you motivate me to do better. Same here, which is why we can't let them win. The next few weeks were brutal, and Brittany met twice a week, their interactions remaining coldly professional. They were producing good work, their analyses of Gatsby sharp and insightful, but the atmosphere was toxic. Brittany made passive-aggressive comments about his writing style, bit back responses to her assumptions about his intelligence. And Jackson's meetings were even worse. They argued about everything, their project progressing in fits and starts. Twice, they almost gave up entirely, considering asking Mrs. to reassign partners, but both were too proud to admit defeat. The strain was starting to show, and time together became dominated by complaints about their partners. Their conversations, once wide-ranging and deep, narrowed to focus on the stress of the project. They were still affectionate, still clearly in love, but the easy joy of their relationship was being tested. It came to a head during one particularly awful meeting between and Brittany. They were in the library, arguing about the symbolism of the green light in Gatsby. Brittany insisted it represented impossible dreams, while thought it was about the corruption of the American dream. The argument had grown heated, both of them raising their voices until the librarian came over to quiet them down. "This is ridiculous," Brittany said after the librarian left. "We can't even discuss a stupid light without fighting." "Because you won't listen to other interpretations," shot back. "No, because you're impossible to work with. Was right about you." "Froze, what do you mean?" Brittany seemed to realize she'd said something she shouldn't have, but it was too late to take it back. "Nothing, forget it." "No, what did say about me?" Brittany sighed. "She didn't say anything bad, just that you could be stubborn sometimes, that you had strong opinions and didn't like to compromise." "When did she say this?" "Weeks ago. We were still talking then before everything fell apart completely. She was venting about some argument you'd had. It was nothing, couples argue. But couldn't let it go. The idea that had been complaining about him to Brittany, her former friend, bothered him more than he wanted to admit. After the library session, he texted, "Can we talk?" She called him immediately. "What's wrong? You sound upset." "Brittany said you told her I was stubborn and difficult to work with." There was a pause. "That was weeks ago. We'd had a fight about something stupid and I was frustrated. I was venting to a friend, which is what people do." "But why would you vent to Brittany about me? She hates me." "She was still my friend then, and I didn't know she'd use it against you." His voice carried a note of frustration. "Are you seriously mad about this?" "I'm not mad, I'm just, I don't know, confused." "Confused about what?" "About whether you actually feel that way, whether I really am difficult to work with." Was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes you are stubborn, so am I. We're both opinionated people, which is part of why we work. But sometimes it means we butt heads. That's normal." "I guess." Hey, his voice softened. "This project is stressing both of us out. Let's not let it stress us out about each other too, okay? Brittany and Jackson are trying to get in our heads, and we can't let them." Knew she was right, but the seed of doubt had been planted. For the first time since they'd started dating, he wondered if they were as compatible as he'd thought. The final week of the project arrived, bringing with it a deadline and mounting pressure. And Brittany had their paper mostly written, but it needed editing and polish. And Jackson were behind schedule, still arguing about fundamental interpretations. Mrs. announced that each pair would have to present their findings to the class, adding another layer of stress. And Brittany would have to stand in front of everyone and pretend to be a cohesive team. And Jackson would have to do the same. The presentations were scheduled for Friday. Wednesday night stayed up until 2 in the morning perfecting their paper, making sure every argument was airtight, every citation correct. He wanted this to be good, wanted to prove that even working with someone who despised him, he could produce excellent work. Thursday after school, he and Brittany met one last time to rehearse their presentation. They divided it evenly, each taking half the material. They practiced twice, their delivery wouldn't but adequate. "This is as good as it's going to get," Brittany finally said. "Agreed." She started packing up her things, then stopped. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you really love her?" The question caught off guard. "Yeah, I do." Brittany nodded slowly. "She told me she loves you too, last week when we ran into each other in the bathroom. I asked her if she was happy and she said she was, that you made her happy." Didn't know what to say. Brittany looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in weeks. "I still don't get it," she admitted. "I don't understand what she sees in you or why she threw everything away, but I guess if she's happy that's what matters, even if I hate how it happened." "I never wanted to come between you two," said. "I know, and she didn't either, but she did, and now we're here." Brittany stood. "Good luck tomorrow." "You too." She left and sat alone in the empty classroom, thinking about love and friendship and the choices people make. Had chosen him, was continuing to choose him even when it was hard. The least he could do was be worthy of that choice. Friday arrived, bright and cold. Wore his best shirt, wanting to look presentable for the presentation. He met before first period, and she looked as nervous as he felt. "Ready for this to be over?" she asked. "More than ready." They kissed quickly, a promise that whatever happened today, they'd face it together. Then they went to their respective classes, preparing for the presentations that would determine whether their hard work had been worth it. And Brittany presented first. They stood at the front of the room, their paper projected behind them, and delivered their analysis of Gatsby. It was good, maybe even great. Their arguments were clear, their evidence strong, their interpretations insightful. When they finished, the class clapped and Mrs. smiled. "Excellent work, both of you. Despite your differences, you produced a compelling analysis." After class, Brittany stopped in the hallway. "We did good," she said. "Yeah, agreed, we did." It wasn't friendship, it probably never would be, but it was mutual respect earned through working together despite everything, and that was enough. And Jackson's presentation was in the afternoon. Waited anxiously, hoping it had gone well. When emerged from the classroom, she was smiling. "We nailed it," she said, hugging. "It was actually good. Jackson and I finally found a way to combine our interpretations, and it worked." "I'm so glad." "Me too, I'm just glad it's over." That evening's parents called her. They'd heard about the presentation, how well she'd done despite the difficult partnership. Told about it later, her voice cautious but hopeful. "My mom said she was proud of me," explained. "She said I handled a tough situation with maturity. It's not forgiveness exactly, but it's something." "That's good," said, "really good." "Yeah, maybe they're starting to see that I can make my own decisions and still be successful. That dadding you doesn't mean throwing my life away." Smiled, "We proved them wrong." "We proved everyone wrong," corrected, "and we're going to keep proving them wrong." As winter settled over the town and the semester drew to a close, reflected on how far they'd come. The project had tested them, individually and as a couple. But they'd emerged stronger, more confident in themselves and in each other. The future was still uncertain. There would be more tests, more challenges, more people who didn't understand, but was learning that love wasn't about avoiding difficulties. It was about facing December brought snow and the promise of winter break. High transformed into a hive of activity as students prepared for finals, holiday concerts, and the approaching end of the semester. And it also brought something unexpected: acceptance. The shift was subtle at first. People stopped staring quite so much when they walked through the hallways. The whispers quieted. Teachers stopped looking at them with that mixture of curiosity and concern. Even some of former friends, led by Brittany's grudging acknowledgement, began treating them with a kind of neutral respect. The project presentations had helped. Seeing and Brittany work together professionally, seeing and Jackson manage their differences, had shown everyone that these weren't frivolous people making impulsive choices. They were capable students navigating complex situations with maturity. But the real turning point came from an unexpected source. The school newspaper, where had been writing for months, decided to do a special issue on relationships and social dynamics. David, as editor, approached with an idea. "Write about your experience," David said. "About what it's like to be in a relationship that everyone has opinions about, make it personal." Hesitated, he'd written about isolation, about literature, about social issues. But writing about them felt too vulnerable. "I don't know if I can," he admitted. "You're the best writer we have," David insisted. "And this story matters. There are probably a lot of kids in this school who feel like they can't be themselves or date who they want because they're worried about what people will think. You and proved that you can break those rules and survive." Thought about it for days. He talked to who encouraged him to write it if he felt comfortable. He talked to his mother, who reminded him that sharing his truth might help others find theirs. Finally, he sat down and wrote. The article was called "The Space Between," on choosing love over expectations. It was honest, raw, and deeply personal. Wrote about being alone, about building walls to protect himself, about the day asked to sit with him and how it changed everything. He wrote about the judgment they'd faced, the friendships lost, the family tensions. But he also wrote about the joy of being truly known, the freedom of choosing authenticity, the strength they'd found in each other. He didn't sugarcoat the difficulties. He acknowledged that their choice came with costs, that sometimes love meant sacrificing comfort for truth. But he also made it clear that for them, it was worth it. When the article published, it went viral within the school. Students read it during lunch, shared it on social media, discussed it in classrooms. Some people criticized it, calling it self-indulgent or naive, but far more people thanked for writing it. A freshman girl stopped him in the hallway to say it gave her courage to come out to her parents. A senior guy admitted it made him reconsider breaking up with his girlfriend just because his friends didn't approve. Even some teachers mentioned it, using it as an example of powerful personal writing. Read it sitting in her car after school, tears streaming down her face. "You captured it perfectly," she told later. "Everything we've been through, everything we've felt, you put it into words." "You inspired it," he said, "all of it." The article did more than just tell their story. It shifted the narrative around them. People started seeing them not as a social experiment or a cautionary tale, but as two people who'd found something real and refused to let it go. The romance of it, the courage it took, resonated with their classmates in ways hadn't anticipated. Brittany was one of the first to reach out to after the article published. They met at a coffee shop, neutral territory, and talked for the first time in months without anger clouding the conversation. "I read's article," Brittany said. "I didn't realize how hard it's been for you." "It hasn't all been hard," replied. "A lot of it has been amazing, but yeah, losing my friends hurt." "You didn't lose all of us," Brittany said carefully. "I was angry, and I said things I shouldn't have. I made it about me when it was really about you figuring out who you wanted to be." Felt hope flutter in her chest. "Does this mean we can try again? Not like it was, but something new." "I'd like that," Brittany admitted. "I miss you, and after working with I get it a little more, he's not what I thought he was." "What did you think he was?" "Some loner taking advantage of you, but he's actually pretty smart, and he clearly loves you, the way he writes about you in that article." Brittany smiled. "That's real." "It is," agreed. "It's the most real thing in my life." They didn't become best friends again overnight. Too much had happened for that, but they started rebuilding slowly, carefully. Brittany joined their lunch table sometimes, bringing Sarah and a few others. The groups weren't separate anymore, not completely. They were starting to overlap. His parents also reached out after reading the article. Her mother called, her voice softer than it had been in weeks. "I want to meet him," she said. "Properly, not as some boy you're dating, but as someone important to you." His heart raced. "Really?" "Your father and I have been talking. We were wrong to judge without knowing him. If he makes you as happy as that article suggests, we should give him a chance." The dinner was scheduled for a Saturday night in mid-December. Spent the entire day anxious, changing clothes 3 times, rehearsing things to say. Picked him up at 6, looking both excited and nervous. "They're going to love you," she promised. "You don't know that." "I know you, that's enough." His house was exactly what expected. Large, well-maintained, with an aesthetic that screamed money and taste. Her parents greeted them at the door. Her father was tall and stern-looking, her mother elegant and composed. Both studied with an intensity that made him want to disappear. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," said, extending his hand. "Thank you for having me." "Thank you for coming," Mrs. Carter said, shaking his hand. Her grip was firm. "Has told us a lot about you." Dinner was formal at first, the conversation stilted as they navigated safe topics. Talked about school, his writing, his plans for college. Parents asked polite questions, clearly assessing him, weighing whether he was worthy of their daughter. Then's father asked about the article. "It was very well written," he said. "Honest, you have real talent." "Thank you, sir," replied. "You wrote about the costs of your relationship, about the judgment, the social consequences. Those things don't concern you." Chose his words carefully. "They concern me. I'd be lying if I said they didn't, but they don't concern me as much as being true to myself and I spent a long time being alone because it was easier than being vulnerable. Change that. She made me want to be brave." "And what are your intentions with our daughter?" Mr. Carter asked, the question direct and loaded. Dad started but touched her hand gently. "It's okay," he said. He looked at his father. "I can't predict the future, sir. I don't know if we'll be together a year from now or 10 years from now. But I can tell you that right now I love your daughter, I respect her. I support her dreams, and I will never ask her to be anything other than exactly who she is." The room was quiet. Mrs. Carter's eyes were bright with tears. Mr. Carter's expression was unreadable. Then he nodded. "That's a good answer." The rest of dinner was easier. His parents shared stories about her childhood, embarrassing moments that made her blush and laugh. They asked about his mother, his home life, treating him like a person rather than a problem to be solved. By the time dessert arrived, felt himself relaxing. "I want to apologize," Mrs. Carter said suddenly. "We judged you without knowing you. We made assumptions based on appearance and reputation rather than character. That was wrong." "We want to be happy," Mr. Carter added. "And it's clear that you make her happy. That's what matters." Was crying now, quiet tears of relief, took her hand under the table and squeezed. "Thank you," he said to her parents, "for giving me a chance." When they left that night was glowing. "They like you," she said, amazed. "They actually like you." "I like them too," admitted. "Your mom is funny." "She is when she's not stressed," pulled into his driveway but didn't turn off the car. "This has been the best day." "Yeah," agreed. "It really has." They kissed in the car, the future feeling bright and possible. Finals week arrived with its usual stress, and studied together at the library, quizzing each other on vocabulary and formulas. Their friend group formed study sessions, everyone helping everyone else. The sense of community they'd built together became a support system during one of the most stressful weeks of the year. Aced his English final, writing an essay about identity and belonging that Mrs. praised as one of the best she'd ever read. Dominated her debate final, arguing a case about freedom of choice with a passion that left her opponent speechless. They celebrated with their friends at a diner, eating too many fries and laughing about stupid things. The last day before winter break, the school held its annual assembly. Awards were given out for academic achievement, athletic excellence, and community service. Sat in the bleachers with and their friends, half listening to the speeches. Then the principal announced a new award, the Student Voice Award, given to a student who used their platform to speak truth and inspire others. "This year's recipient wrote an article that moved our entire school community," the principal said. "An article about courage, authenticity, and the power of choosing love. Please come down." Froze was grinning, tears in her eyes. Their friends were cheering. Around the gym, students were clapping, some standing. Even Brittany and Jackson were applauding. He walked down the bleachers in a daze, accepting the plaque from the principal, standing in front of the entire school for the first time in his life. The spotlight he'd avoided for so long was now directly on him, and instead of feeling exposed, he felt seen. "Speech," someone yelled. Others picked up the chant. "Speech, speech." Looked at the principal, who nodded encouragingly. He stepped up to the microphone, looking out at hundreds of faces. "I don't really know what to say," he started. "A few months ago, I was sitting alone at lunch, convinced that being alone was safer than being known. Then someone asked to sit with me, and everything changed." He found in the crowd, her face glowing with pride. "Taught me that being yourself is worth the cost. That love, real love, is about seeing someone completely and choosing them anyway. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who's ever felt like they didn't fit, whoever had to choose between comfort and truth. You're not alone, and your voice matters." The applause was deafening. As walked back to his seat, students he'd never spoken to reached out to touch his shoulder to tell him good job. When he reached, she pulled him into a hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," he whispered back. Winter break was 2 weeks of peace. Spent time with his mother, helping her with holiday preparations, talking to her about his year. She listened to everything about his friends, about the award. When he finished, she hugged him tight. "You've grown so much," she said. "I'm proud of the man you're becoming." He spent time with two, going to movies, walking through downtown looking at holiday lights, sitting in coffee shops talking about everything and nothing. They exchanged gifts on Christmas, gave him a leather-bound journal for his writing, and he gave her a necklace with a small book charm. "For all the stories we've shared," he said as he fastened it around her neck. "And all the ones we'll create together," she added. On New Year's Eve, their friend group gathered at Maya's house. Her parents were out of town, and she'd invited everyone for a low-key celebration. They played board games, watched movies, and counted down to midnight together. When the clock struck 12 and kissed, surrounded by friends who accepted them completely. It was perfect, a moment of pure happiness. "This year changed my life," said later, sitting on Maya's porch with both of them wrapped in a blanket against the cold. "Mine too," agreed. "What do you think next year will bring?" "I don't know, but whatever it is, we'll face it together." Leaned her head on his shoulder. "Promise." "Promise." When school resumed in January, the energy was different. The article, the award, the acceptance from parents, all of it had its relationship in the eyes of the school. They were no longer a scandal or a curiosity. They were just, and a couple who'd overcome obstacles and come out stronger. Mrs. pulled aside after English class one day. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. "When I assigned those project partners, I knew it would be difficult for everyone involved, but I also knew that if anyone could handle it, it was you and." "You did that on purpose?" asked, surprised. "Sometimes we need to be challenged to discover our strength," she said. "You both rose to the occasion, and you produced some of the best work I've seen in 20 years of teaching." Thought about that conversation for days. The challenges he and had faced, the tests of their relationship, hadn't been random. They'd been opportunities to prove to themselves and others that what they had was real. And they'd succeeded. Senior year loomed ahead with college applications and big decisions, but felt ready for it. He had friends. He had confidence in himself that he'd never possessed before. One Saturday in late January, and drove to a lookout point outside town. They sat on the hood of her car, looking out at the city below, talking about their dreams. "Where do you want to go to college?" asked. "Somewhere with a good writing program," said. "Maybe New York or California, somewhere I can tell stories that matter." "I want to stay close to you," admitted, "wherever we end up." "We'll figure it out," assured her. "We've figured out everything else." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the city. Thought about how far he'd come, from the lonely boy who sat in the corner to someone who believed he deserved love and connection. Had given him that. But more importantly, she'd shown him how to give it to himself. "Thank you," he said suddenly. "For what?" "For asking to sit with me that day. For choosing me when it would have been easier not to. For showing me that I was worth knowing." Turned to face him, her eyes serious. "You were always worth knowing. I just got lucky enough to figure that out first." "I love you," he said. He'd said it before, but it felt important to say it again to make sure she knew. "I love you too," she replied, "more than I knew was possible." They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, the city lights beginning to glow in the dusk. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles to overcome, but they'd face them together just as they'd faced everything else. Because sometimes, the best things in life start with a simple question. "Can I sit with you?" And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is say yes. And story didn't end there, of course. They went on to face college applications and long-distance relationships and all the complications that come with growing up. But the foundation they'd built, the courage they'd shown in choosing each other, remained constant. Years later, when people asked how they met, they always told the same story. About a girl who asked to sit with a lonely boy. About a boy who said yes when he could have said no. About two people who found each other in the cafeteria of High and changed each other's lives. It was a simple story, really, but the best ones usually are. Went on to become a writer, publishing essays and eventually novels about identity, belonging, and the courage it takes to be yourself. Became a therapist, helping young people navigate the complexities of relationships and self-discovery. They stayed together through college, through graduate school, through the messy process of building lives and careers. They got married in a small ceremony, surrounded by friends old and new. Maya was maid of honor, David was best man. Even Brittany attended, having fully reconciled with over the years. Jackson sent a card, wishing them well, having found his own path to happiness. Their wedding vows were simple but profound. Promise to always see completely, to never ask her to be anything other than herself. Promise to always choose, to keep choosing him every day, just as she had that first day in the cafeteria. "You changed my life," said, his voice thick with emotion. "You changed mine too," replied. "By letting me in, by being brave enough to be vulnerable, by showing me that real connection is worth fighting for." Looking back, both of them could see the path they'd walked. The initial question, the judgment, the obstacles, the growth. Every challenge had made them stronger, every test had proven their commitment. They'd built something real in a world that often settled for performance. And it all started because Carter looked across a crowded cafeteria and really saw him, and decided he was worth knowing. She asked to sit with him. He said yes, and everything changed. The truth is, we all have moments like that. Moments where someone extends an invitation, offers a connection, asks to be part of our story. The question is whether we're brave enough to accept, whether we're willing to let our walls down to be seen, to take the risk of being known. Had been scared, had been uncertain, but they'd both been brave enough to try. And that made all the difference. Because love, real love, isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees your imperfections and chooses you anyway. It's about being vulnerable enough to let someone in, brave enough to show them who you really are. It's about sitting at a lunch table and having a conversation that changes everything. It's about saying yes when fear tells you to say no. It's about trusting that being yourself, completely and unapologetically, is enough. Learn that, and together they built a life on that truth. Years after graduation, published his first novel. It was dedicated to, with a simple line, "For the girl who asked to sit with me and changed my life forever." Read it in their small apartment, tears streaming down her face, remembering that scared 17-year-old girl who'd been drowning in expectations and decided to choose something real instead. "Do you ever regret it?" asked her once. "Giving up your social status, your old friends, everything." Looked at him like he'd asked the most ridiculous question in the world. "Not for a second," she said. "I'd choose you every time. In every lifetime, in every version of this story, I'd walk across that cafeteria and ask to sit with you. Even knowing how hard it would be. Especially knowing how hard it would be, because the hard things are the ones worth doing." They sat together in their apartment, holding hands, thinking about the journey they'd taken. From that first awkward lunch to this moment, years later, still together, still choosing each other every day. It hadn't always been easy. There were still challenges, still obstacles to overcome. Life didn't stop throwing complications at them just because they were in love. But they'd learned something important in that high school cafeteria, something that carried them through every difficulty. They'd learned that being truly seen, truly known, was worth any cost. They'd learned that authentic connection was rare and precious and worth protecting. They'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply show up as yourself and let someone else do the same. And they'd learned that love, real love, starts with a question. "Can I sit with you?" The answer for and had always been yes. And it always would be hemmed together, choosing each other even when it was hard, and trusting that what you'd built was strong enough to withstand the storms. It was terrifying, but it was also wonderful. And for the first time in his life, was excited to see what tomorrow would bring. Touched his face, realizing he was smiling. "Yeah," he said, "she really is." Nodded, "Same time tomorrow." As he walked to his next class, he realized he was smiling. It felt strange on his face, unfamiliar, but not unwelcome.